Hey watch friends, if you've ever wondered what it would look like if a Zelos ZX and Skyraider had a baby, today you're in luck. We're going to be looking at their all new model. This is the Starfighter. This one is a prototype that was sent into the channel for review. This is at just, I believe, a loaner. As far as the basic specs, first for the unboxing, do note this is a completely new packaging experience for Zelos. So if you didn't get a chance to check out that unboxing, I did previously feature that. I do encourage you to check that one out because this one is something different. Otherwise, it comes with the basic stuff you would expect. It has an all-new box, it has the warranty card inside of that, has the typical Zelos 1-year warranty. As far as the specs of this one is going to be coming in at 41 millimeters for the case, and that is measured roughly at the 3 o'clock to the 9 o'clock position. The bezel does step down significantly. As you can see here, there's a very pronounced step. That's coming in at 39.5 millimeters at the bezel. The lugs, as you can see here, are a little bit on the wider side, and these are coming in at 22 millimeters, so it's still strap change friendly, which is nice. The lug to lug is going to be coming in at 48 millimeters, though many of you have already noticed and commented that this does have male end links, and many have commented on preferring female end links. This does extend it out some, but it's not too bad. It comes in at 53.1 millimeters, including the end links. Because as you can see, this has a pretty straight drop down for it. So that barely extends out beyond. And what Elshan, the owner of Zelos, has shared is that it would have actually increased the length to go with a female because of the nature of the coupler, and I believe to have the spacing in there, so I'm assuming for the cutout. To be honest with you, I'm not entirely certain of all the specifics, but that was the response to that one. I too am with you in that I oftentimes prefer female end links, but I haven't found this to be too bad, and we'll see it on my 6.5 inch wrist. As far as the thickness, this one, for being an automatic movement and a chrono, this is only coming in at 13 millimeters, including this box edge sapphire crystal, which, as I just mentioned there, this is a box edge, and you can see a nice pronounced lip there, and that does have an inner AR coating on that sapphire crystal. Their specs have this coming in at 12 millimeters without the crystal, which when I tried to measure it, and it's very tough because you can't really get past to get a clean measurement on, I think it's actually coming in a little under, and to my eye, that looks like more than a millimeter difference for that box edge crystal, but that's what their specs state. As far as the movement, this one will be coming with an ETA 2894, which is an excellent movement, and we'll look at this closer throughout. It's one you don't see very frequently, and part of that is because of the price, which I'll just say up front. This one's going to be starting at around $1,500 at launch, and that's, depending on the dial variation, can potentially be even more. So it's definitely not a cheap one, but you do get a premium quality movement in that. The ETA 2894, if you're familiar with the 2890 series, and we've looked at some others in the past, that one will have the typical stuff that you would expect. It's going to be a high beat movement, has a decent power reserve to it. This one is going to be a dual pusher chronograph style configuration for it. Obviously, we can see date window down at 6 o'clock position. The water resistance is going to be coming in at 50 meters or 5 atmospheres. As for the weight, size to my 6.5 inch wrist, I measured this at 140 grams right on the nose. So it's on, I would say, the lighter side of a middleweight. So it's one that you feel, you know that it's there, but at the same time, not heavy at all, and has been very comfortable to wear. So with all of that out of the way, as far as the basic specs, let's go ahead and look at some of the characteristics of this one. First, for the colors. This is available in 5 different varieties, and each of them offer a completely unique dial configuration. The one we're looking at today is a Spitfire dial, which is actually taken from a Spitfire aircraft that flew before World War II as well as through World War II. There's also going to be a dual meteorite version, and that's a gray, so a natural meteorite, with blue meteorite inlays for the subdial, so that's really neat. There's an aventurine dial, which I'm a sucker for aventurine. I love that sparkle, so that's really nice there. There's also a frost or full loom version, and then finally there's going to be a helical or whirlpool blue version as well. As we mentioned, each of these dials really is going to be unique, not only the texture as far as across the dials, but when you look at ones like the Meteorite or the Spitfire that we're looking at today, you can see they have completely distinctive patterns. Being a relatively naturally sourced dial, the pattern through, like with this Spitfire, you'll notice scratches, abrasions. This one even has a little divot inside of the 1 o'clock position that really just gives it that unique feel, which I personally appreciate and I think is a cool touch. The basic configuration of this is going to be a Flieger style, so more of like a pilot leaning, and it's of course a bi-compax configuration, so you can see the subdials at the 3 and 9 position. The logo is going to be applied in typical Zelos fashion there at the 12 o'clock. And then there is going to be printed text at the 6 o'clock position. You have the Starfighter name. On the subdials, you have the minute, or the second rather, and the minute track for the two respective. The primary second is going to be the 3 o'clock subdial, and then your chronograph minutes is going to be your 9 o'clock subdial. And then out on the perimeter, you do have individual minute markers for a chapter ring also. So great legibility touches there. And then finally, down at the 6 o'clock position, you do have a date window that is an unframed and just this traditional square cut date window. As for the hardware, first for these hands, they're what I would describe as kind of like a modified alpha handset with skeletonization. And the reason I call them that is they do have kind of the alpha shape to them coming out, but then on the flip side or on the back end where a counterbalance would be, it does continue and extend out. So it's almost like a double-sided alpha or a diamond shape or whatever you want to call it. But regardless, it's custom, it's cool, I like them. The markers are going to be applied all the way around. You do have the Flieger triangle and the 2 dots at the 12 o'clock position. You have rectangles going all the way around. And then at your 3, 6, and 9 position, it does have smaller rectangles that are applied as well. The finish on each of those on this particular variant, it might look black. Sometimes it might look a little bit silver. In actuality, it is typically going to present black. When the light hits it right though, it's what I would describe as a polished gunmetal color. So it does have some additional presence going on to that, to where you get a little bit of that light play and reflectivity, but at the same time for legibility against that plain gray dial, it typically does look black, which makes for great legibility. Nice, easy to read there. Then finally, looking at the loom. This one does have loom applied across all hands as well as the markers. In typical Zelos fashion, it does not disappoint. The loom to my eye appears to be BGW9 throughout based on that blue coloration for it. The loom on the hands and markers is very strong, though as you would expect on the subdial hands, they are going to be the most dim and will fade the quickest over time, but legibility has not been an issue with any, especially if you're just looking to tell the overarching time and not down to the seconds, though you do have a nice functional chrono with a loom hand as well for easy legibility there, even in the dark. Shifting over to the bezel, this one does have a fixed bezel, and as you can see, it is going to be a radial brush as its primary finish going all the way around. However, on the side, and it does step down and set back as we've already talked about earlier, but at that setback, it does have nice polishing accents going through there too. So that's a great touch, nicely applied there, and gives it a very distinctive look overall. The bezel itself, or the insert I should say itself, is going to have a slope angle to that, which I think nicely bridges between the case, which is aggressively cut in, up to that box sapphire crystal. I think that harmonizes it and was a good call there. As far as the text on this, you can see that it does have a tachymeter going around as you'd expect for a chronograph. This, to my eye, appears to be milled inlaid with black enamel for the finishing on that, but as we saw, that does not have loom applied there. As for the case, one thing to note throughout, and this is true of the bezel, the case, as well as the bracelet, and even the clasp, is this one does have a scratch-resistant coating applied all the way around. So that's a fantastic addition, especially with all the polish accents that we'll be seeing here momentarily. The case is going to be a mix of brushing and polishing. You can see on the side here, this has primarily going to be a vertical brushing there, and then it does have aggressive polish accents and milling that are going through. The steps down as far as the milling, you can see the bezel set back, but then additionally the undercase, to give that really, really slim mid-case look, the undercase is cut in as well, and then down at the bottom it matches with a mirror of a sandwich chamfer. So you have angled chamfer there, that's polished, and then up at the top you've got that again on the bezel. So that's a nice mirror polished chamfer there. So I think that's a really coolly done. As far as the actual milling for this, you can see the case shape is very unique. Not just from the overall with having that milled out to give that very thin mid-case look to this, but additionally, as you go through and look at the lugs, you can see this isn't a straight cut. So they did angle and kind of chops in there for that, which I think gives a very distinctive profile to this one. It does have kind of that signature, like the ZX did, with that spaceship look from the side, and I think that's really awesome, especially if you look at this landing on your wrist there. It really does look like a spaceship or spacecraft touching down. So that's pretty awesome. Looking over on the top of the lugs, you can see this is one of the many polished accents that this has throughout. It has aggressive chamfers on the outside of the lugs, and as you can see, that gives the lugs a very distinctive look as well. You can see that that breaks up that angle, so instead of just being a straight cut down, that chops there, adds the polish, so textural changes, and then that's set against a perimeter where the case extends out beyond the bezel, and that has radial brushing as you go throughout there. Shifting over to the crown side, you can see it does have the crown positioned at 3 o'clock. As we already talked about, it does have a dual pusher construction for this, which if you push the top one, so the 2 o'clock, that's going to get your chronograph hand started. And then if you push that again, that'll stop it. And then at the 4 o'clock position, that's going to reset. The very tactile feel on this 2894, very aggressive click and push to that. Very pronounced, like that a lot. Really excellent, excellent feel to this. One of the best I've ever felt. As you can see, this does not have, it continues over the overall look. It does not have any kind of integrated crown guard into that. It's just set right into that overall milled construction that mirrors the flip side. Shifting over to the crown itself, the crown on this is going to be a similar style to the Skyraider, though it is a little bit smaller. I measured this in at 6.5 millimeters, whereas that one, as I recall, was coming in at 6.9 millimeters, so almost 7. This one, though, like the Skyraider, even though this is not a manual wind, this does come with a push-pull crown, just like the Skyraider did. So that is not going to be screwed down, so you can just start winding straight from the set position there. And additionally, with the wind on this, in the unboxing video, I wasn't certain whether I was screwing it in or not. You can't feel anything for this. It is one of the smoothest winds I have ever felt. Butter smooth. So it could just be this this prototype sample here, but that's absolutely amazing. And I've played with a lot of other ETA movements as well. So this is pretty excellently done here. The crown on this, you're going to see there, it has very nice pronounced milling, just like the Skyraider did. And then for the logo, you can see that it is a sign crown, though it is not loomed for that. Shifting over to the case back is going to be a screw-in construction. It is also going to have radial brushing consistently all the way around. So this one, I don't see any polish accents as you look through, though it is set against the backdrop of the case where it has the polished accents there. And then, of course, you can't miss that custom rotor in the back on that 2894 movement. So that's a really nice touch. Shifting over to the bracelet, this comes standard with a 22 millimeter bracelet to match with the lugs. This does taper down, though, very aggressively down to 18 millimeters as you work your way down. The end links on this, as we already talked about, are going to be male end links, though they do have a very nice straight drop. There's also a heavy application of polishing, both on the center of the links, which gives almost a skeletonized look depending on how the light's hitting it, but additionally on the exterior perimeter, that's milled in and adds polished accents there as well. It does, though, have a generous portion of brushing that's applied to each of these links also, so it really breaks up the overall look, and I think it's well executed. The links are going to be retained with screws, which if you don't already have one, do highly encourage you to invest in a good screwdriver. I'll have one linked in the description. It's an Amazon affiliate link, but it's a very cheap but excellent quality Weira screwdriver there. Highly recommend picking one of those up. The back of the bracelet, you might have noticed when we were looking at the case back, does have quick release spring bars as well. So you're going to have easy strap change friendliness there, not only versatility with the size, but additionally with being able to do that without any tools. As for the clasp on this is going to be signed. It's going to continue with a brushed pattern, and it does have polishing on the outer perimeter of the clasp. It's just going to be one like we've seen before with a traditional double pusher, no fold over construction. It does have milling for the bridge. And then most importantly, it is going to have toolless micro adjust. So that is an excellent feature there. All you have to do is push a little lever and then you can slide that in and out on the fly. So that's fantastic. All right, so now that we have a better feel for the watch itself, what it's like to live with this one, and the overall characteristics, let's go ahead and check out some comparisons here. We've talked about it a fair amount, but here it is next to the Skyraider. This gives you a very good idea as far as the overall sizing, despite the fact that on the right with the Starfighter, that you're looking at a 41 millimeter case Whereas the Skyraider is a 42mm case. You can see overall presence, it is significantly smaller in appearance on the Starfighter. And that's because of all that setback, the wide bezel on that. So not only is it set back from the bezel, steps down to a 39.5, and then you have a wide bezel, then the box edge crystal. So it really gives a smaller dial appearance. So this, in many respects, is kind of like the Hammerhead in that it has a relatively large case comparatively to the dial. So the case to dial ratio is different than you might otherwise expect, but we'll talk about that further. But here it is next for the Flieger pattern, as well as you can see kind of what that meteorite looks like for the inlays on the version, the meteorite version where it would have that. Next, this is looking at it next to the Zelos Horizon GMT. And this is a 40mm here, so you can get an idea there. This one does have just a little more dial presence to it, but if you're familiar with this one, many people say that this wears smaller than its 40mm. I think the same is true here. This, in many respects, I think wears more like a 40mm watch, give or take, despite the fact that it's a 41. And then finally, wanted to show it next to an unconventional but also gray. This is a Dorenzo DRZ04 in the gray, and that gives you an idea sizing wise there. This is again a 40mm watch, just so you can have a reference and comparison there. Alright, so now that we have all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and wrap things up with my personal view of the positives, some critiques because it's not perfect, and the overall summary. First, for the positives, I think there's is a lot to like about this watch overall. First, the dials. This particular one with this Spitfire, I think it's a very alluring dial. I love the uniqueness of the texture. I love the history and story behind this one. And I think the other dials are pretty fantastic as well. Aventurine, always a sucker for that. Meteorite, I can't get enough. But the Frost in the blue versions are very cool as well. The overall design is extremely unique. It has so many elements, whether you're talking about the milling on the side of the case, the cuts on the lugs, whether you're talking about this extremely unique bracelet incorporation, the step down for that, the overall layout, everything about this watch to me is just unique. I think it's very captivating to look at, and I think it's well done overall. The design, especially for being a automatic chronograph, this is very, very thin. 13 millimeters, especially when you compare this to like a 7750, where you're talking 15, 18 millimeters thick for those. 13 millimeters, including a box edge crystal, is just very impressive. And then 12 millimeters, even more so. So that's fantastic. So yeah, it adds to the cost, but I like the overall thinness that results from that movement choice. Comfort on the wrist has been excellent. Have not had any complaints about this, no hot spots. You can feel the quick release every now and then, but nothing to complain about there. I think it's been great. The Toolless Micro is something that I love from the brand. I'm a big fan of that clasp and in general Toolless Micro clasps, so that's excellent. The coating, I wish every one of my watches could have that coating to help keep it looking new longer, so that's fantastic as well. And then finally, the sizing. We talked about this. Most of the time, I think for smaller wristed folks, you wouldn't really consider an automatic chronograph just because it's going to typically wear so large, both on thickness and overall size and proportions. So this one, with coming in at a 41mm case, but still having characteristics that make it wear smaller, I think it's very size versatile. I think larger wristed folks will still be pleased enough that it has enough overall presence, though you'll have to get used to the dial size, and we'll talk about that. Similarly, smaller wristed folks like myself, I think it wears just fine. I wouldn't be too worried about the male end links, though I realize the spec at 53mm is a little bit daunting for some. Finally, for the critiques here. So now that we have the positives out of the way, the critiques. First, the overall bracelet size. This one, I can't help but feel, I don't want to fault the design choice for this. I personally think I would have preferred possibly a 20mm, just step down a little more. 41's right on that size, where 42, I would say I expect a 22. 40, I expect a 20. With this one, I think they could have gotten away. That would have taken just a little less taper for this, a little less aggressive for the taper, but mainly just for that kind of slab look for the end link with having that cut like it does. I think 20 would have just slimmed it out just a little bit more through that, and it would have given just a little more contour to this overall. I think I would have preferred it, but honestly, I'd have to see it in renders to really know for sure. The dial for some, I think, is going to be too small. So I just mentioned, I think it's size versatile, and I do think that's the case, but I know many people found the Horizon's GMT to be polarizing, and I think that'll be the case here as well. On the topic of polarizing, just like with the Horizon GMT, the box crystal. I know some people really like them, some people are neutral to them, and some people really dislike them. So that's one that I think is going to be a polarizing choice, so do be aware of that. It doesn't have a lot of distortion, unlike the GMT where you're trying to read that GMT rehot or chapter ring going around. This one, I don't find that it impedes the legibility for your minute track, so do be aware of that. I don't think it has any real negatives, so it's mainly just an aesthetic choice. And then the last thing, and this is relatively minor, but if you care about fingerprints, carry a microfiber cloth with you and just come to terms with the fact it is going to have fingerprints everywhere. This thing, with all of the polish accents that it has across the bracelet, across the case, etc., this one is going to have fingerprints. It's been pretty much impossible for this review, as well as in use, to keep it from having smudges and fingerprints throughout. I haven't found it's really bothered me in real world usage for it, but when you're trying to get nice pics for Instagram or otherwise, it can be hard to clean that up. So where does that leave us overall? What is my take for this one as you're preparing for to go for launch and seeing if you want to pick one up? And there are limited quantities of all of these. I mentioned in the unboxing, there's only 50 of this particular dial, so do act quickly if you are planning on picking one up. Even though the entry price is not that small, I expect that they'll sell out quickly. My personal summary: I go to the immortal words of Dave Chappelle when he was channeling Dylon, the world's best rapper. This thing spits hot fire. That's all I can really say about it. Overall, is it a perfect watch? No, but I think it's really fantastic watch overall. It's another, to me, hit from Zelos, and I've really enjoyed my time with it. So I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you did enjoy this, please do hit that like button. Most importantly, if you haven't done so already, please do smash that subscribe button. It's tremendously helps the channel and is greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching.